Hello, members. Welcome and good evening. I'm Anna Spooner from the Tastings and Events team at the Wine Society, and I'm joined this evening by Ben from the Fine Cheese Company. So cheers, Ben. Good evening.
Cheers. Good evening.
Cheers. Oh, we're so looking forward to this one. I mean, for anyone who's joined our cheese events before, welcome back. Ben and I love putting the world to rights over a few glasses of wine and some fine cheeses, and this week is no exception. So a few tiny bits of housekeeping before I get overexcited. Can you see me gravitating towards my plate of cheese? We've got Catherine behind the scenes this evening. So hello, Catherine, and thank you for your help. If you do have any technical problems tonight, please either send Catherine an email, if that's your easiest way, and you can email her at tastings@thewinesociety.com. Or alternatively, if you use the chat button, you can select who you want to send a message to, and Catherine is disguised discreetly as Tastings team. So if you do want to send a message directly to her, then you can. Alternatively, if you want to use the chat to chat to your fellow members, please do. Just remember to select everyone when you're writing a comment. In the chat, you can let us know if you like the pairings. You can say yay or nay to wines, comments on the cheeses. Let us know what you're thinking. We like to get a bit of feedback as we go. And there's also a spot for you to write some questions. So that is the Q&A button. Ideally, it's great if you put the questions in the Q&A button, because if Ben and I are rattling through conversations, you know, looking at each other and chatting away, we might not see it pop up in the chat, but we do, or I certainly do, monitor the Q&A. So if you have any questions, wine or cheese related, please pop them in there. So that's it, really. I think that's all I need to say. Now, to introduce the event, I will say that I requested Ben. Many of you will know, sometimes we do the wine and then Ben chooses cheese and vice versa. I asked Ben, could you pick 4 really special British cheeses, because we'd like to celebrate a bit of British, and I will pair the wines. Now, I did try and pair English wines. I found one that was a really, really good hit, and then I've actually just paired cracking wines that go with the cheeses. So I hope you don't mind. If you're looking panicked because I've got 5 wines to the side of me, do not fear. The Cabernet Sauvignon exhibition, Chilean, sold out in the run up to the event. So I did recommend a second wine, and I will taste both of them. We've allowed an hour and 15. That does include questions. So that gives us just over about 10 to 15 minutes per pairing. And I will warn members, Ben tapped me on the knuckles earlier. Because we're going wine first this week, I've decided the order, and Ben was quite a little surprised by the cheese order, but I think it's going to work, because we're going to taste the wine first, then try the wine with the cheese. So in each pairing, I'll go first, and then Ben will follow up with the cheese afterwards. So if you feel like we go quite heavy on the cheese quite early, don't worry, that is the case. Cheese number 2 is quite punchy, but for good reasons, because we've got a beautiful fruity wine to go with it, and sometimes that combination is really delicious. So without further ado, if you are tasting along, I hope that you have a lovely chilled bottle of Bacchus, made by Chapel Down, and it's the 2020 vintage. Bacchus is, you might hear a lot about Bacchus, obviously the god of wine, but the grape variety itself is really coming to its own in the UK. But it's not actually it's not a native grape variety to the UK, surprise, surprise, but it's actually not a native grape variety to anywhere. It was produced in Germany, and it's a cross between a grape called Silvaner and then a crossing, so it's the child of Silvaner, and a crossing of Riesling and Müller-Thurgau. So make of that what you will. Sometimes people call these kinds of grapes Franken wines, but that's just not true. They're really, really beautiful. And actually they're made for a purpose. And this particular one was made for the purpose of it being lovely in cooler climates. Now, in the UK's climate, so I should say it was made in the 30s, became commercially available around the 1970s. And in the UK, it's sort of sung even better than it has done in Germany, where it was produced. It's sort of become our calling card in a strange roundabout way. It's got this incredible, and if you are tasting along with me, it's got this incredible floral, citrus, floral, and grass are the things that often get sort of thrown around. For this one, for me, actually, the citrus I'm getting is grapefruit, but I will taste it in a minute. But floral, citrus, sorry if you see a dog, my dog's just walked in. Floral, citrus, and grass are all the common sort of components that are usually associated with this grape variety. If you were going to compare it to anything, if you've not tried Bacchus before, Sauvignon Blanc is probably its most similar. I think there's quite a lot of Sauvignon Blanc-esque aromas here. So yeah, if you like Sauvignon, you'll probably like Bacchus. A little about this wine in particular. It is made by Chapel-Down. I did a beautiful visit to Chapel-Down in Kent with some friends, actually, not even with the Wine Society. We did it as a sort of girly day out, and they have a brilliant setup here. Not only is it incredibly beautiful, they are, I believe, it's always between themselves and Nightingale as to who owns the most vineyard land in the UK, but it is certainly one of the most successful wineries in the UK. They've plantings there go back to 1977, and they, unlike Nightingale, who produce exclusively sparkling wine, they produce a range. So they have champagne style sparklings as well, but also whites, reds, rosés, you name it. It's absolutely cracking place to visit. You can do a vineyard tour, you can go and sit and have lunch. They produce what was the most expensive single vineyard English still wine in the UK called Kit's Coty. It certainly was at the time I visited, but I don't know, it might have been pipped now. No pun intended. The way they produce this is they pick the whole bunches. I spoke a bit about whole bunches yesterday. I think I might have confused a few people. So if you were on that call, white wine's a whole bunch pressed. And what that does is you put whole bunches into the press so that the juice runs through and you get that lovely first pressed juice. And then that juice is then fermented. So you don't ferment them with the stems, but all this beautiful juice runs through like a sieve, nature's sieve. So high quality wines are often made in this way. It's a little bit more effort per se, but it makes really beautiful, clean, fresh wines. It was fermented at cool temperatures, stainless steel tanks. They really, really want to preserve that freshness and vibrancy. In terms of flavors and aromas, like I said, I actually get loads and loads of grapefruit here. So in terms of fruits, I am slightly more tropical. 2020 was a hot growing year in the UK, so we are on the more tropical. So yeah, lovely, almost melon, but lots and lots of that sort of wet grass as well. It smells British. I always think Bacchus, it smells exactly like where it's come from. It smells like a wet, beautiful, freshly mown field in England. So yeah, I hope you enjoy it. I'm going to hand over to Ben to talk about the cheeses. I think also, Ben, please let me know what you think in the chat. But before I even hand over, Ben, I will just quickly ask, before we go into proper questions, which we'll do in a moment, we have had one question that's quite important, which is, should we eat the rinds? So before we even attempt to go into the cheese tasting, do you mind just telling us about eating, which rinds we should be eating and which we shouldn't?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Anna. So Caerphilly, so Gorwydd Caerphilly, which is this one here. I would say usually if it's younger, eat the rind. I'd recommend eating the rind of this cheese, the Ogle Shield, not the Berkswell, which is the third, and not the not the last two. Usually, I would say eat the rind always on Gorwydd Caerphilly, but we've been aging this since November, and it's the rind's smelling fairly punchy. You can see it's quite broken down, so I definitely try it with the paste. So in the center, we can see that it isn't quite broken down. Around the edge of the center, we can see that, I don't know if you can see from here, but you have this center here, which is quite curdy. And then from here to here, you have breakdown, and then you have the rind. I'm going to try the rind, and then I'll recommend if you should be eating it or not.
I just tried some. I quite liked it. It's very, very salty and, like you say, punchy, but it's really quite pleasant.
Mm-hmm. Actually goes with the cheese quite well. Yeah, I think it works really well. I think that the milk itself is quite rich, and actually with the rind, I think it works. It works really well. It's not the rind isn't so hard on Caerphilly usually, but because we've aged it for an extra 3-4 months, it's got a little bit more firm. So yeah, definitely. Usually with Caerphilly, eat the rind, and with the next cheese, Ogle Shield, it's a wash rind, and so definitely recommend eating wash rind cheeses, the rind of wash rind cheeses, and bloomy rinds, and etc. The only things you have to watch out for is in regards to rinds is how old the cheese is. So cheddars, we think about they're minimum 12 months old. On the rind of cheddars, you have pork lard, and then you have muslin cloth or cheddar cloth. And so that pork lard may become rancid after 12 months, 15 months, and so it doesn't taste that great. And yeah, most cloth bound cheeses will have some kind of lard or butter that may go rancid, and so maybe steer clear of those.
So soft and bloomy, good. Cloth bound, not so good.
Exactly, yeah. And wash rind, if it says wash rind, then definitely eat it, because it's there for a purpose. But yeah, the first cheese, as I was saying, was Gorwydd Caerphilly, made by Chianti brothers. So on the left we have Morgan, and on the right we have Todd. So they're brothers. They're brought up in West Wales. So they made cheese in Wales up until about 5 years ago. And then they moved to Somerset. So they moved to just outside Weston-super-Mare. They moved to Weston-super-Mare because of basically quality of milk. They couldn't get enough good quality milk in Wales, and they were having lots of TV problems. And so they looked around where they could move to, and they found a farm in Weston-super-Mare. That farm is owned by the Mead family. The Mead family own Yeo Valley, and they have lots of organic farms around the southwest. So they've always made Caerphilly, and Caerphilly is that farmstead cheese that you would have always made on farms in Wales. It's a territorial style, so it's crumbly, it's full of moisture, and just a really easy make, a basic make of cheese. So they brought their production from West Wales to Somerset, and they thought, whilst in Somerset, we should try and make a cheddar. So that's why they also make pitchfork cheddar. And on those photos that were up before, on the right-hand side, you saw Morgan and Todd, and in front of them they had cheddar curds. But when they moved over, they also brought their brine. So a Caerphilly is brined. So once they make the cheese and they put it in the molds, they then put it in a brine, and it's brined for 24 hours. And the brine basically makes a really good rind, and helps with the development of the mold around the outside. And the mold around the outside is called mucor, and that's what you expect on a Caerphilly, which you can see there. What you also notice on these Caerphilly is that line that you see going around the edge, and that is because of the molds that they use, and it's a typical Caerphilly mold. You'll see it on this Caerphilly, on Duckett's Caerphilly that West can make, and just shows that they're doing the practice in the right way. So in terms of flavour, usually you get quite lactic, acidic flavours, quite high in citrus fruits, which you'd find, especially in this one, in right in the centre where it hasn't broken down. But where you have the breakdown, you get much deeper flavours, mushroomy, musky flavours, and the rind goes even more savoury. And I haven't tasted with the wine, Anna.
We're definitely getting some divided opinions. Some people saying love it with that, can't decide whether they prefer it with the softer stuff in the center, the outside. I have to be honest, when I tried this combination, it was just slightly younger. So I think my cheese would have been more of the soft squishy bits in the middle. So I think probably this was intentionally for me to do with the soft squishy bits, those slightly more, as you say, um, acidic, slightly tartar bits. But
Yeah.
having said that, it's quite fun with the aged stuff on the outside too. It's a very fruity, savory combination.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I do think if you take a bit from the center, you definitely, for me, it works a little bit better. Whereas, more higher acid. And I think those pair really well.
I've had a couple of questions about the wine, so I'll just address those quickly, and then I've got one question I need to double check with you that I've just answered, but I want to check I'm right. Phil's asked me, when I say chilled, what temperature do you suggest? The lovely thing about Bacchus is this rule doesn't work all the time, but I think it lands very easily into one of the easiest rules, which is if it's unoaked and fruity, then straight out of the fridge. There's no oak here. It's all stainless steel. It's very, very fruit driven. So you're just expecting to get those sort of herbal and fruity aromas and nothing else, or grassy and fruity aromas. And, you're not getting vanilla or something nutty, for example. So those styles of wine really straight out of the fridge is absolutely fine, especially if you're drinking them outside and it's warm. Don't chill them too much to death in an ice bucket full of ice, because that can be a bit dangerous. But generally, it's fridge fresh for these. And then how long does a wine last? Like this. I don't know how long Matthew's actually put on this, but I would suggest you've got a couple of years in you on a wine like this. They're not built to age, but I would say, yeah, Julia Shaw's got a 2018 Bacchus. And I possibly would say if you have an older Bacchus, I would probably suggest it would go slightly better with the darker bits outside the cheese, because all it will do is it will lose some of that sort of really bright racy aroma, not lose it to the point of not being pleasant in any way, but it slightly develops a bit more and you don't get so much of a, I don't know, the easiest comparison is a slightly older Sauvignon Blanc, a really young one that's just come off the boat from New Zealand, for example. It really does punch you between the eyes with those sort of grapefruit or guava or whatever it is aromas. And then over time, those tend to settle down a bit. So Indira, it will last a good couple of years. And when I say last, that's with a bit of development. And then I have to ask Ben, because I have answered the question and I hope I'm right. Mike asked, what paste, please? But paste is the terminology for the center of the cheese. Is that right?
Yeah. So we have the rind and then the paste.
Thank goodness. After 18 months, I've picked some bits and pieces up. Oh.
Sauvignon Blanc. Why did it taste like Sauvignon Blanc?
It's funny, isn't it? And it's not related in any way. Some grapes just taste quite similar to each other. There's certain pyrazines. I mean, that's getting a bit technical. We won't go too much into it. But so, for example, the Sauvignon Blanc pyrazines that produce these sorts of aromas are common in other grapes. And you get some sort of commonality. And sometimes it's genetic and sometimes it's not. So, for example, you can also get grassy notes sometimes in a Grüner Veltliner. You can also get grassy or herbal notes in red wines like Cabernet Franc. And Cabernet Franc and Sauvignon Blanc had a love child, Cabernet Sauvignon, and that's really grassy when it wants to be and when it's underripe. So it's I suppose it's just different chemicals and they're produced in different ways. And what winemakers can do is they can encourage certain conditions to produce those sorts of aromas, which sounds very manipulative, but it can actually be as simple as certain yeast strains will encourage different esters. So during a fermentation, you could decide that you want to really encourage those grapefruity Sauvignon Blanc aromas. So you might actually purchase a yeast strain. Again, that sounds very Frankenwine, but that's really commonplace in the wine trade. You might purchase a yeast that would encourage those flavors because they do produce different esters during fermentation. So there's a combination. yes, inherent in grapes, there are certain characteristics that, are there, and you can't really add or remove them. You can turn up the volume, turn it down, but they exist. And then you can encourage more of those sorts of things through the way that you produce the wine. So this would be a completely different wine if they'd done it in oak and turned the lees stirring. It would be creamy, it would be completely different. But fundamentally, the Bacchus grape variety just has loads in common with Sauvignon.
Yeah, it makes complete sense.
And Caerphilly and Sauvignon, such a classic combination. So when we were going to do Caerphilly, I thought, I want to do an English wine. This is going to be the best shot at a good English wine and cheese pairing, because I know normally it's what grows together goes together, but sadly, the English wine scene's not quite caught up with the English cheese palate. So we're waiting for those big beefy wines to go with all your cheddar members at the end.
It's really difficult with British products, isn't it?
It is. But we're getting there. The Brits are getting there. We're just a little bit behind the William said we'll need a bit more global warming. Yeah, we will need quite a bit more global warming to be able to produce some of the wines at the far end of my row, but there we go. Right, so should we move on to the next wine? I'm really excited to talk about the next wine, actually. Well, I love Lebanese wine all the time, but I think there's never been a better time to support the wines of Lebanon. And this particular producer is really special. Kasara actually was started by Jesuit monks in the 1850s, and it's the oldest and largest winery in Lebanon. So it's really quite special. I'll tell you a bit more about them in a minute, but I'm just going to quickly tell you about the grape variety whilst we've got this slide up. Carignan. So you may have seen it before. If you've seen the word Carignan or the grape variety Carignan, chances are you have seen it in the south of France. So particularly your sort of Languedoc, Roussillon regions, they bottle Carignan by variety. But it's also a really important grape in Spain where it's called Carignana. But it also is a really important tool in the toolkit of Rhone winemakers. So southern, not in the north, in the south, southern Rhone winemakers actually use a lot of this grape variety as a sort of salt and pepper seasoning in a blend. So it's usually very, very, very rarely a large proportion of the component, but you will find it dotted around in the southern Rhone. But it's heartland more so down the Languedoc. Really lovely grape, very sort of fruit forward, generous. There's a few reasons I picked it with this, but it's red fruited, and I particularly think this cheese needed a red fruited herby wine. So that's why I went for it. I'm going to be honest, before I quickly show you a picture of Kasara as well, I love this wine. I love it, but I actually chose it as a backup wine, and I'm going to tell you now so that you can try them all together. I don't want you to eat all of the next cheese, but the next cheese that we are tasting, is much to Ben's sort of bewilderment, is the Ogle Shield. Now the Ogle Shield, and Ben will talk about it in a second, I actually thought the Ogle Shield and the cheese after that went beautifully with the Chianti. So the Kasara is almost this added bonus wine, but I do encourage you with the next cheese, try both wines, and then I will talk about the Chianti afterwards. But I'm going to pop up, Catherine very kindly will pop up a picture of the Kasara winery, because the Lebanese wineries look like sort of nothing you've ever seen before. They're so wonderful, and if you Google Kasara after this, it's quite hard for us. We have to make sure that all of our pictures are allowed to be used, in public domain, obviously. And if you do Google Kasara afterwards, or even better, take a trip there, they really are absolutely incredible wineries, and these beautiful old buildings, and very, very picturesque, and very different to the stuff we see in Europe and for Western Europe and the New World. So a very special place. The Jesuit monks actually looked after it for over 100 years, and they only sold it to sort of businessmen, if you want to call it that, in the 70s. And as part of that sale, they started to get French enologists involved. So French wine experts, or grape experts specifically as well. This Carignan is hand-picked, and then they destem it, press it. They ferment it in wild yeast, so the yeast that occurs naturally in the vineyards, and then they they leave it to macerate in old concrete tanks that were built by the Jesuit monks. So they have this sort of beautiful old traditional winemaking style to go with this wine. And also the grapes are old vines as well. So the I think it's 60 years average age of the vines that go into producing this wine, which is really lovely, and it gives that extra concentration. So beautiful, rich color, gorgeous. Smell wise, I love the red fruits. I think that's what sells it to me. It's this sort of red currant, red berry, red cherry aroma, but also those herbs. I often think maybe that's why I wanted to put it with the Chianti. The Carignan grape just for me smells of, I don't know, roasted lamb and putting, you know, red currant jelly and herbs and thyme and oregano on a roasted lamb. So it's doing all of that for me. I want lamb whilst I enjoy this. But we don't have lamb. We do have a delicious cheese though. So I'm going to hand over to I haven't tasted it. I tell a lie. I'm going to try it first because this does have beautiful tannins, which are really important, and lovely acidity. So we'll have a quick taste.
I get where you're coming from there. It reminds me of if you have lamb on a Sunday roast, and like this is the wine that you want to be drinking. I can just imagine having. Yeah, I get that.
It's lovely, isn't it? And it's really refreshing. It's incredible value for money in my eyes. So much richness, so much flavour. I get a lot more black pepper on the palate compared to the nose. The nose was very fruity, and the palate's got this beautiful black pepper finish. Again, it makes it very, very food friendly. So on that note, I will pass over to Ben.
Thank you. So next we have Ogle Shield, which is our wash rind. So Ogle Shield is made in South Somerset by Jamie Montgomery. Jamie's on the right there. Jamie also makes Montgomery cheddar, which is maybe one of Britain's most famous cheddars. But he also wanted to make a different cheese, just like Westcombe make Duckett's Caerphilly, and just like the Trethowens make Gorwydd Caerphilly that we just tried. His mother had Jersey cows, and when it was passed on to Jamie, he, from his Frisians, he makes his Montgomery cheddar, but he wanted to do something with the Jerseys. See the Jerseys here, beautiful cows. So they make a really rich milk, and actually they, as we were talking about before with the Trethowens, they also have Jersey milk, but they don't add all of the Jersey milk into their cheddar or into their Caerphilly, whereas Jamie makes Ogle Shield just from Jersey milk. So it's really rich, really high in fat, really high in protein, and gives a much more yellow colour to the cheese. So they make it in a wash curd. So basically they wash the curd, which gives it this pliable texture. So basically when they've separated the curds and whey and they're taking the whey off, they're adding hot water, which brings up the pH and gives a more pliable texture. And so once they've done that and they put it into molds, it's a wash rind cheese. So it's a semi-soft wash rind raw milk. And so they're washing it every 3 days with brine, which gives that more acidic and savoury rind to it, which I think contrasts really well with the rich milk of Jersey milk. You see that in other cheeses such as Morbier and recently Ashcombe. I think we have done Ashcombe at some point. Well, I'm not sure. We have? Yeah, we have. Yeah. So Ogle Shield, interestingly, so Jamie's family own Cadbury Court North Cadbury Court down in South Somerset, and basically the cows graze on old battle grounds, and they found a Bronze Age shield on the fields that the Jersey cows were grazing on, and then so that's where the shield comes from. And the ogle comes from Bill Oglethorpe, and Bill Oglethorpe used to work for Neal's Dairy, and he found out found the perfect brine solution for this cheese, basically. So it's called Ogle Shield from Bill Oglethorpe, and the shield is from finding the shield in Cadbury Court.
Oh, I love this pairing. I have to say, do you know what? I've just tried it as well, Ben, with the Chianti, the wine that I thought was going to be better. I actually prefer tonight, on the night, I prefer the Casara. I think this is the right choice. And I think specifically, members, if you haven't been brave enough to try this with the rind, exactly as you say, Ben, it's that combination of this sort of like dewy, gooey center, bendy, and all those things you said. They're exactly how I'm tasting it, but with this beautiful tart, sort of sharp rind.
Yeah.
And actually, I think that's really nicely matched in the wine. There's sort of this juicy, yummy fruit. I think a member said that initially on the nose, the fruit was maybe a bit sort of boozy and alcoholic. But then when you taste the wine, there's this tartness and acidity and herbs and pepper. And I think that's, I think the cheese does almost what the wine does. It gives you two stories, which I love.
Yeah, you know that I love that Casara, as you say. I told you that before. I really love that. But the next one, the Chianti, smells much more savoury, and they have different. I think they add different things to Ogle Shield.
Yeah, exactly. And there was a reason that I didn't choose the Chianti and the Ogle Shield, because I did think that the Casara was good as well. Ogle Shield, I will go on to it in a moment when we talk about the Barkswell in a minute. I'll explain why I think the Chianti just pips it for some reasons. But something about this Chianti, I think maybe because it's not too old, perhaps because it's 2020, it can stand up to those more savoury notes, because there's still quite a lot of fruit. But I get your point completely, Ben. It is more savoury. It's perhaps a bit more refined. It hasn't got that kind of juicy, fruity thing that the Casara does. Yeah,
I think they both go great for different reasons, and I really like that, because that's exciting, isn't it?
It is. And that's the fun thing about a cheese board as well, because a lot of people, I'm sure we'll get the question like this at the end, but a lot of people always ask, what wines to go with multiple cheeses. When you find good double cheese and double wine matches, that's the holy grail, because what you don't really want to do is have such an enormous cheese board that you've got one wine that goes with one thing and one wine that goes with another, and logistical nightmare. Whereas, if you could have a few of these sort of semi-hard, some wash brine cheeses, but have like a thread that runs through them that works, and then perhaps only have two wines, that's, for me, is the ideal cheese board.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Less faff. And then you serve them in magnums and everyone's happy.
I just quite like to mention as well with Ogle Shield, so it's cooked curd, as I was saying, you're adding hot water to it. So if you want anything really good to melt, where the fat isn't going to separate, ask for a cooked curd cheese, like Ogle Shield, or raclette, or Ashcombe, or an Alpine, because then the fats don't separate from the curd.
Okay, that is a very good fact. I'm going to be writing that one down later, because we do love a raclette in our house. I'm not sure I would it would be too good to put on a raclette, but I could definitely have it as cheese on toast. Quick question before we move on, Ben. We've had a question from Roger. How old is the Ogle Shield?
Ogle Shield will be, I would say, 2.5 to 3 months old. So they, from make, so when it's made, it will be a week old, and then it'll probably be brined for a day, and then washed every 3 days, so probably 3 weeks, and then mature. I reckon, yeah, that's about right. It completely changes. We may buy more Ogle Shield or any cheese and keep it for longer. Then that might be because of people aren't buying it as much, or we might want to keep it longer because we feel like it needs longer. And especially with raw milk cheese, you need to think it doesn't go on. There is a specific age. It goes on the specific quality of the cheese rather than the age.
Rather than the aging.
Exactly, yeah. So yeah, I'd probably say, yeah, it's about right at this point.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. We've also had some great comments. Somebody suggested Ogle Shield macaroni cheese, and then Indira's put with a little truffle. Yes, that all sounds delightful. If I will say now, if you're going to add the truffle though, I would probably say, oh, Julia's just said it. I would probably say you want to go with the Chianti. That being said, there'll be a Rhone producer somewhere that would shoot me for saying that, because truffles are rife in the Rhone as well. But truffles and Chianti are a classic combination. So if you are going for an Ogle Shield truffle, toasty macaroni cheese, whatever it is, then you probably want to go for the Chianti and invite Ben and I over for dinner. All right, so without further ado, let's go on to that Chianti. Like I said, please do try it with the Ogle Shield as well. It should go with the both cheeses, but I did intentionally put it with the Barkswell. It's also really tricky with the order. Chianti is, it's not always a very, very heavy wine, and this particular Chianti is from a sub DOC. Well, sorry. So there's big Chianti, which is the all-encompassing area, and then there's little subzones. And this is from a DOCG, so it's still in the upper level, but it's from a smaller area, but it is still the biggest. I'm not explaining that very well. Chianti is the all-encompassing, and it's from the largest subzone within Chianti, Chianti Colli Senesi. And the actual wine produced here is quite variable. This is not a very, very extracted Chianti. So what I mean by that is it's not been sort of macerated forever, oaked forever. This is definitely on the lighter style. But I think the beautiful thing about the grape variety that goes into Chianti, which is Sangiovese, is that you can play with it to both ends of the spectrum. And so this is a sort of, in my opinion, a really lovely perfumed, spicy, again, red fruits. You can hear a lot of the words that I use to describe the Cassara are quite similar. So obviously that's why I did it. But this is a producer, a very small producer actually. He's called Simone Santini, and the winery is called I can never pronounce this, Tenuta le Calzinee. Not my finest Italian, but Simone Santini makes the wine. That's his name there, and he's a relatively young guy. He bought this beautiful small estate. It's about 3 kilometers from the town of San Gimignano, which is part of Siena. It's a very affordable wine. You can see the price tag there, £10.95 for a Chianti. Is gorgeous. And yeah, I think, Catherine, we have a picture. The next one is the lovely picture of, yes, so the beautiful area which this is based, the rolling hills of Chianti. There's nothing really, nowhere quite like it in the world. But even though the producer's relatively new or young, should I say, the grapes that go into here, the Sangiovese that goes into this is from a few different plots, but they were planted in the 70s, early 70s, the 90s and the 2000s. So what you do when you've got a range of different ages is you can actually get some complexity from blending different age vines, which is interesting. He plants at quite a high, it's planted at quite a high yield, which is good. It gives the grapes lots of competition with each other. They have to work harder. Their roots have to dig further down. And as I mentioned, this isn't extracted for, a month. I think the last one, did I say the last one was 21 days? I think it is. And this is only extracted for 10 days. So Sangiovese is a punchy grape variety though. So still at 10 days, you're going to get a lot of wine for 10 days. It's partly stainless steel and partly an oak maturation after this, and then they blend the two together. So what you get it smells very winey, and I like that. I think it smells of how you sort of imagine a good wine should smell. It needs a big swirl, so please do swirl away. Mine was quite closed when I first opened it earlier. But part of the joy of the grape variety Sangiovese is the perfume. It is this sort of beautiful red, almost floral perfume with cooking spices and that lovely sort of richness without being overpowering. But the other thing that's beautiful about the Sangiovese variety that makes it so cheese friendly is the high acid. It's got great acidity. So hopefully when we go on to taste the pear, when Ben starts talking about it, you'll see that acidity really cuts through the pungency of the cheese. And I think that's why it worked with the Ogle Shield as well, is that acidity cut through the squishy bit in the middle, and the ripe red fruits, the fresh red fruits, balance the saltiness. And I think we're going to see something similar with this cheese, but certainly Sangiovese in general has this kind of earthy complexity that I think is really important with cheese pairings as well. So try it, give it a go. It's funny, Sangiovese, what you're left with afterwards, it's almost like your mouth is tingling with red bursting fruit acid pleasure. And the length here is really lovely and refreshing and delightful. I think it's a great wine for this time of year. And probably I'd like to drink this kind of Chianti all the way through into midsummer. There are Chiantis that are heavier, that are more sort of real winter warmers. Not that today hasn't felt wintry, but this is the sort of wine that I drink all through spring, which I really love. So anyway, I'll stop blabbering on. I want to try it with the cheese. So I'll hand over to Ben with the cheese.
Thank you. I really love that as well. And I really like Sangiovese. And I don't know why I like Sangiovese, but I do. Probably because it's really fruitful and it's obvious, and that's great for me with wine. But yeah, with the Berkswell, so the Berkswell, I've chopped it down quite a lot because I've been eating it with the Chianti, but it looks like this on so it's sheep's milk, it's raw milk, and it's made just outside Coventry in Berkswell, or just on the outskirts of Berkswell. I have to say, I really like this pairing, and I do agree that the acidity in that wine cuts through the fattiness within sheep's milk, because sheep's milk is really high in fat, the highest in fat, so even higher than buffalo milk. So on the right hand side we have Stephen Fletcher. So Stephen Fletcher owns the farm. His son George has become quite involved in the farm. They're looking at herbal leys and this new thing about herbal leys within cheese making. Behind him is obviously his sheep. On the left hand side we have our Berkswell. So I go and hand select our Berkswell. I go up every 3 months and select batches. So I select batches between 3 and 4 months old to be sold within 5 or 6 months. And what I look for in our Berkswell is quite a high moisture content. I think especially we find in Manchego or Pecorino, which are cheeses that we would come across maybe more often than Berkswell. I find that they go quite dry. And so when I select Berkswell, I look for quite high moisture. Within quite high moisture, we also get quite fermented flavors, so especially fermented fruit. And in certain batches I've been selecting recently, fermented, and I've been picking out fermented melon, which is really strange, and I'd never tasted that in cheese before, but I'd found that in Berkswell. There isn't any other British cheese like Berkswell, and they do such an amazing job of making this cheese. On the outside, they've been experimenting. So they've been making it about 30 years. Stephen Fletcher is the owner of the farm, but actually Julie Hay has been making the cheese for 20 years. And on the outside, they plasticoat. So they plasticoat to keep out mites. So we all have cheese mites on the cheese. And actually ingress of cheese mites on sheep's cheese can be really detrimental. On cow's cheese and on cheddar, we kind of expect it. It's where you see bluing, you see that damage on the inside of the cheese. But on sheep cheese, it can be really detrimental to the flavors of the cheese. So they slightly plasticate it. So when you plasticate cheese, it doesn't aerobically mature. It does it very slowly, but it also anaerobically matures. So we're keeping more moisture within the cheese rather than moisture escaping from the cheese. And I feel that this, to say it's, I think it's, I have actually the date on this one, which is the 16th of August last year. I think, say it was 16th of August last year, and it's full of moisture and beauty.
It's so soft.
Yeah, it's absolutely gorgeous. Yeah.
There they are.
So we have obviously the head on the left, and that's where the milking parlour is, and the milk comes straight through into the make room on the right hand side. And the shape of the cheese, so how it's matured, is just in IKEA colanders. There's nothing, there's nothing extravagant about that. It's just, yeah, how it is.
I like the I'm not sure what the word I'm looking for is. I like it. I like it. Yeah, it's such a delicious fine cheese with IKEA colanders. Why not?
I know. So if it works that way, then
Exactly. If it works, definitely don't change it. Put your money elsewhere. Buy more sheep. Make more cheese. Lovely.
Yeah. I think really sheepy then, which is lanolin. I'm sure we spoke about lanolin before, but that's why everything that is made from a sheep tastes like sheep is the lanolin.
And it's a flavour you can strangely pick up in wine. Some old Semillon in particular, you get lanolin. You can taste sheep very strangely, but it's quite a classic. It's quite a classic signifier. We've got some people saying their favourite so far. I'm going to also, lots of people. I'm going to let you into a little fact as well, members. I'd never tried it before this, not right now, but Ben sends me the cheeses in advance, and I had to Google what it was. And so the first thing that came up was pecorino, and obviously I can't just open all the wines in the world for these tastings, so I thought, okay, if I were tasting a pecorino, what would I go for? And then actually, funnily, I did go mainly Italian to start with, and actually it ended up working. It was the Chianti that I did choose, and for a lot of reasons that people have mentioned. There is an earthiness, yes, Peter, absolutely. There's that kind of the Italians do all of those flavors so incredibly well. So I think flavor-wise, there's some lovely complements in these two cheeses.
I think it works really well, Anna.
And what I would say, members, as well, if you tried an older Chianti, it would be just as good. I saw one member say that this is ridiculously good for a young Chianti, and I would agree, but Chianti ages beautifully and it develops. And you mentioned fermented fruits. You can get a kind of almost rotted fruit, but in a really yummy way. That sounds horrible. I know we've talked about mites and rotted fruit, but no, you get this lovely sort of almost slightly oxidizing fruit sometimes with old Chiantis that is really scrummy, and I think would still work with this cheese. I think you could have a Chianti at any age and this cheese would have enough guts to match it. I have a quick sheep question for you, Ben.
Yeah.
What breed of sheep are they, please?
They are they're Lecaun.
Lovely.
Lacaun.
Thank you very much. And William has asked a question about Chianti. Is Chianti always 100% Sangiovese or a blend? Really good question, William. This wine is 100% Sangiovese. However, does not have to be called Chianti. Chianti, regular Chianti, DOC that I mentioned, that has to be 70% minimum. And Chianti Colisenetsi that we've got here has to be 75% Sangiovese, so slightly higher. And then I think there are a couple of, I think Chianti Rufina has to be 80%. I certainly think it goes incrementally up. But the interesting thing is you can add all sorts of other varieties in. So you can actually add a couple of white grapes in to regular Chianti as well. So Malvasia, Trebbiano, and that can actually add some lifted aromatics. It's actually not very common, but you're allowed to add up to 10% white grapes. And you can add international varieties. And I feel like that's quite a new rule, maybe from the 90s. Or maybe even 80s, I'm not sure. But you can add things like Merlot, Syrah, Cabernet. However, I would say that real proper Chianti producers tend to focus on Sangiovese, and if they're adding anything else, it's going to be more like 5%. I really don't think that, it's not as authentic. And actually, quite frankly, Sangiovese is such an iconic grape variety that you can tweak it with a couple of other varieties. So if you need to bump the acidity, you might choose to put in a tiny bit of white grape that's got a higher acidity, like Treb. But I would say more often than not, you're going to find mostly Sangiovese. I don't think I've ever tasted a Chianti at 70% Sangiovese. I might have done and not known, because they might not have told me. And by all means, things like Merlot are cheaper to grow and easier to grow than Sangiovese is. So yeah, you might find that sort of supermarket Chiantis bump up their bulk up their wines a bit. It's not dissing supermarket Chiantis, that was a horrible generalization, but more entry level, bottom shelfy Chiantis, where you're not 100% sure what the producer is more likely to have Merlot helping it along. But yeah, assume Sangiovese unless you're told otherwise. But then yeah, if it's a larger producer, then you might find something like Merlot has crept in. So let's go on to I'm going to do the final two wines together, if that's all right, Ben. We will do the exhibition first. That's not a flavour thing. That's just because the wine was first in, it was available to buy first. And I'm not really sure what percentages of people have which tonight. So I'm going to try and give them both equal attention. But the nice thing is that they are both from Chile. They're both made with Cabernet Sauvignon. They are both from the Alto Maipo region of Chile. And Toby Morale describes the Alto Maipo, the wines from that region in particular, but the Cabernet, as fine, firm, and linear. So they're quite serious Cabernet Sauvignons. And some of the blend of the exhibition is from, so I think it's about 10 to 15%, is from Pirk. And that's probably awful pronunciation. The other wine is exclusively from there, and they're from little sub-regions, really small subzones. And I do actually think I've got a picture of, I've got a picture of the vines from this, the Pirk vines from this wine, but they'll be very close by to the vines from the second wine. So they're all from a very similar part. The Pirk, I'm going to stop saying it because I can't pronounce it. They really like the gravelly soils there. So the gravelly soils, Cabernet loves gravel. Grave in the Medoc, in Bordeaux, the left bank, is gravel-based soils, arguably the finest Cabernet of the world. And so these are soils that really, really suit this grape variety. They give it elegance, they give it structure, they give it length. And this is often, our exhibition is often quite an award-winning wine. So we're on the 2019 vintage now. I believe we've got some more coming in for our Chile offer, which is just around the corner. So if it does come back in stock and you haven't bought it before, I would have to say this is a wine that I would wholeheartedly recommend. It's aged for, I'll tell you where the other part of the blend's from, actually. That's an easier one to pronounce. Puente Alto is where the rest of the blend comes from. And Toby says that is a bit warmer, perhaps. It fills out the mid palate, which is a bit of a wine geeky term, but it rounds out that sort of middle section. It's hard to describe, really, but it makes the wine feel perhaps a bit fuller. And it's given 16 months in oak, and I think I'll tell you about the next wine in a minute, otherwise we'll get confused. But this wine's 16 months in oak. It's exhibition label, so it's our own label, but it's made for us by Concha y Toro. And Concha y Toro are they often get described, and I think even on our website we call them the Penfolds of Chile, and that's because they make some beautiful but very much mass market wines. And they also make some absolutely top draw. So their portfolio is huge. We had their sustainability expert on last week doing a sustainability webinar with us. It's insane. You know, this is a company that started in the 1800s, but they are probably one of the biggest brands. You know, I don't even imagine what they do to the GDP of that country. the volume that's produced is huge, but the quality at the upper end as well. So the sort of these sorts of wines, but upwards as well. They even have a collaboration with Mouton Rothschild. So it's called Almevivia. Don't hold me to that. But yeah, you can Google it. They've got a collab with Mouton Rothschild, which is, yeah, that just goes to show how seriously they're taken in the wine world. Smell wise, classic Cabernet. So we've got black fruits. If you go Ribena, that's fine, because I love the fact that Cabernet can taste like Ribena. But I called something alcoholic Vimto yesterday. I'm not sure it went down very well. I mean Ribena in the purest sense of black currant juice. Juicy black currants is what it reminds me of. It's got that cigar sort of woody note to it, some sweet vanilla-esque, beautiful oak there as well. And I'm hoping, because of that oak, and I've not actually tried this one today, I have tried the one before, because it had been a while since I tasted that, because obviously this was my original choice. But I tried this one again today. Sorry, I haven't tried this one again today, but from memory, it's got the plushest, softest, silkiest tannins. So I'm going to give it another go. Classic Cabernet. My mouth is watering with acidity. It's so refreshing, but at the same time, there are these beautiful tannins that have coated my mouth, but they're not uncomfortable. It's juicy, but also mouth coating. That is serious Cabernet Sauvignon in my eyes. Before I go on to the next one, I'm going to address something, because William's asked, and I actually think this is a very, very, very fair point, and something that's being talked about nonstop at the moment at the Wine Society. He has mentioned that the exhibition bottle is what they would call a naughty bottle. What Hugh Johnson would call a naughty bottle. Sebastian Payne, MW, our buyer. Catherine, you might have to type it in the chat and remind me. What does he? Oh, SHBs, silly heavy bottles, he calls them. So yes, it is an SHB. It's a silly heavy bottle. Unfortunately, the next one is as well. Chile are a little bit behind the curve on getting lighter bottles. But as I just mentioned, we had the sustainability expert of Concha y Toro on last week talking to us, and she said that that's what they're looking to do. Reducing bottle weight and glass weight is of huge importance to the company. So yes, they will be doing it. But at the Wine Society, we're also asking our suppliers to do that. So that is something that we're working on at the moment. We've just employed a new director of sustainability, Dom DeVie, who you may have heard about, you may have seen on a newsletter or something such. But if you do attend the AGM this year, virtually or in person, but if you do attend the virtual AGM this year, if you've had your virtual or your in-person invite yet, please sign up and please come and hear about some more sustainability bits and pieces, because we've got a lot going on. But yes, silly heavy bottles or naughty bottles, unfortunately these both are. Let's go on to the second wine. So this, as I mentioned to you, I actually retasted it this morning just to double check that I wasn't going completely mad, and it is just as heavenly. For me, this one is ever so slightly more green, so it's got something slightly more herbal to it, but only just. It's got, AGM notifications are going out towards the end of the week. No, towards the end of March, sorry. Catherine, I'm so behind the times. Yeah, that's why you haven't heard, but please do sign up when you do get your AGM notification, because you will hear plenty more on that subject and others. Yeah, so for me, this has got all of the stuff I was talking about earlier, but instead of it being quite so fruity, it's got a little bit more of a green leafy thing to it. That might be to do with age, to be honest with you as well. I think it's a year older, so we're not expecting it to be quite as juicy. All the same things though. Oh yes, this is so much wine for £13.95. It's powerful, it's full, it's rich, it's soft, it's supple, it's delicious. Love it. Peter has mentioned here Terroir Hunter. Terroir Hunter is the sub-brand of the Undaraga group. So the Undaraga group have a special label called Terroir Hunter, and they specialize in finding the best sites for certain grape varieties. So yeah, they have found this plot and they say this is, you know, this is it for us. And as I mentioned, this is 100% of that Pirk soils, so we are sort of expecting something slightly more refined. I think I've seen someone just put shoe leather. Yes, it is leathery. I totally agree. It's got that kind of leathery, earthy thing going on, slightly older, and from those really intense gravelly soils. This one is aged for 14 months in oak. Let me just check that. 12 months in oak. I lied to you. I knew it was slightly less, but yeah, 12 months in oak, and it's been really gently extracted. So it has still got some oak. Chilean wines tend to have a little bit of new American oak in them, sometimes French, but often American as well. And it has that beautiful softness on the palate, which I love. Winemaker is called Rafael Urajola, and I can never pronounce that right either, but he's this incredible young winemaker, and he specifically looks after the whole group, but his sort of baby is the Terroir Hunter wines. So I hope you enjoy those. Ben, I'm going to pass over to you for the final cheese, our cheddar, and hopefully whichever wine you're trying with it, you're going to enjoy. So cheers.
Thanks. We've had so many cheddars on, haven't we? And this is the first time that we're going for a cheddar that's outside Somerset, which is a bit of a strange concept for a business that is very much southwest. So this cheddar is made in Scotland. It's made just south of Fife. It's raw milk, and it is plasticated on the outside like Keen's is. So basically, they started making this cheese around 2007. It's fairly new to us. We've been selling it on mail order, so on our website and in our shops for a while, because we think it's a really good example of a Scottish cheese. And for me, I'm responsible for sourcing all of our British products, and I don't think that we represent Scotland very well. And so we've been saying this for a few years, and this year we felt that we wanted to promote this even more and put it into our wholesale brochure. So it's just like a Southwest cheddar. So it's raw milk, can be plasticated. It's made with traditional rennet. It's made from milk from their own herd on their own land. They're just farmers. It's owned by Jane and Robert Stewart. They started making territorial, so something similar to Caerphilly or Lancashire or Cheshire or Yarg or something like that. And that cheese was called Anster. However, they found that they weren't selling much of it. And so Jane made a trip down to the southwest. She learned lots from cheddar makers, and they chose to make alongside Anster St Andrew's cheddar. So they make it in 12 kilos rather than 24 kilos. So for a Somerset Arslan cheddar to have this PDO, it has to be 24 kilos. However, they don't make cheese anywhere near the southwest, and so they make it in 12 kilo rounds, and they plasticate it like Keen's do, and I find it really really different to southwest cheddar. I think it's slightly drier in texture, but I think it's more full of moisture and it's a bit more rounded. It's you have like a histamine tang to the flavour. It's quite fruity. It's just very, very different to how the cheddar makers make it in the southwest, and I found that really, really interesting. This is, I have to admit, the only dairy of all the British products that we sell that I've never been to see. So I'm going to see them in 2 weeks' time for the first time.
Well, pass on my compliments. I think it's amazing.
I've met them at shows, and I've met them. They've been down to see us, but I've never been to see their dairy or their herd or their farm where they are. So I'm really looking forward to that because I think they make fantastic cheese.
It's delicious. Ben, just to quickly ask, I apologize. You've mentioned plasticated.
Yeah, plaster coated. Yeah.
Plaster coated. Okay, good. I've said it wrong. So, do you mind? Tracy and Phil are both a little lost about what that is. Would you mind just? I mean, I don't know what it is either, Tracy and Phil. Would you mind explaining to us non-cheese geeks what plaster coated is?
So it's vegetarian based actually, but on the outside of the cheese, you see this it's like shiny. So on traditional cheddars you have cloth, and the cloth is taken off when you buy it, and you have underneath just the natural rind. But on certain cheeses like Keen's or Berkswell that we had before, or St Andrews, they do a really light. It's like a paint basically that they put over the cheese, which it is perforated, so there are breathing holes in it, but it doesn't draw out too much moisture. So that means that they can have a 12-kilo wheel cheese, and they can keep it for longer, so age it for longer, and it doesn't lose too much moisture. So just a technique that's used within cheese making. Wax is very different. If we look at wax, it's completely anaerobic. Air cannot flow between the cheese and outside of the wax. So that cheese that is in wax has never been aerobic. You will never taste the terroir, as you say in wine. And I think a massive thing with, and you find it in sheep's milk a lot, but you find it with St Andrews and Keen's, is that you don't get any bluing in the cheddar, so you get no mold that goes into it, but you also taste the terroir.
Okay. Sorry
for my pronunciation.
No, terroir is perfect. It's a French word, so no one could pronounce it anyway. Oh, thank you, Ben. Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating when you start to get into all the technical things, and we've always talked about how many similarities there are. I did a whole thing yesterday on anaerobic fermentations. You know, there's so many similarities, and you know, the way that cheesemakers manipulate chemical processes in order to produce a final result is so similar to winemaking. It's just crazy.
And the cultures, as you talked about earlier, that is very similar. Yeah.
No wonder they go so well together. On that note, I'm just going to ask you another sciencey geeky question on cheese, if it's all right. I've had a question that said, and actually, I'll tell you what, before that question, can I just say why I think the pairing goes well? Because I haven't actually said that yet. So members who love their cheddar and Bordeaux varieties, I tried this with some Bordeaux, original classic French Bordeaux. I've just dropped some cheese on the floor, sorry. Hope my dog doesn't come and find it. I want to eat it myself. No, when Ben sent me this cheddar, I tried it with, I picked up the wrong cheese, sent me the cheddar. I tried it with a range of different wines, and I had instinctively thought a Bordeaux could be nice. We haven't done a good Bordeaux with cheese in a while, so I thought, okay, I'll try it. But it's so soft and sort of, it's really, it has a real sweetness to it, this cheddar that you kind of described a bit, but yes, it's salty, and yes, it's crumbly, but it's got this real freshness to it, and the classic Bordeaux just didn't quite work as well. I needed some more give, I needed some more voluptuous fruit, and this is, you know, a Bordeaux variety but grown in Chile, where it's at high altitude, so it keeps nice and fresh, but it gets so much more sunshine and it gets less rain, and so therefore it sort of has a lot more juicy fruits to it. And so I think I think for me, that's why I went for a New World Cabernet over a Bordeaux, if members are interested in why I paired it that way. So there we go. So let's go on to some questions. We've got a couple more minutes left. Some of them are easier than others. I'll start with the tricky one for you, Ben, which is the high volume popular supermarket cheese, are high volume supermarket cheeses all pasteurized, or are there any non-pasteurized supermarket cheeses?
So all high volume cheese is pasteurized, but not all supermarket or food hall cheese is pasteurized.
Okay.
High volume, yes, because you can't do high volume raw milk because it's so difficult to manage the milk.
Okay.
So in your general supermarkets, yes, all cheese is pasteurized. In your food halls, there are cheeses that are pre-packed, that are raw milk, that we sell, but just slightly different.
Okay. So you're more deli counters, that
Yeah.
sort of thing. Okay.
But you can still get them in food halls.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. So we have a question. I'm going to double it up because we've had two people ask very similar. Why haven't you chosen any blue cheeses, and why haven't you chosen any soft cheeses? I think it's a bit of my fault, isn't it, Ben?
It's completely your fault.
We've done quite a few soft and we've done quite a few blue before, and I really pushed Ben that I wanted to do 4 completely brand new cheeses. So Ben actually did send me Ben he has thrown me under the bus, Peter, but it's completely my fault. Ben sent me a lovely list, and there were softs and there were blues in there, and I put my foot down and I said, we've done a few of those before, granted 12 months ago, so we will repeat them. But I said, I've been on your website, I really want to do a Caerphilly, and I really want to do this cheese. And you said you'd like to do a Scottish cheese as well. So we basically I was the wicked witch, but then we actually chose cheeses that we got really excited about. So I apologize to both of members who've asked about soft and blue. Entirely my fault. I'm going to answer a question really quickly, David, on closures. So David Buchanan's asked about the closures, which have all been mentioned on the pages. So the closures for the wine. I'm not going to go into too much detail. We could do a whole hour session on it. But the question's disappeared. But it was whether you are, I think you asked about diams, cork, and twin tops. Cork is just natural cork from a cork tree. Diams are treated corks, becoming really popular. So they use the cork material, but they treat it. And the process, I understand that how they treat it is how you roast beans. No, how you decaffeinate beans. We have an entire article on diams on the website. Toby Morale is going to kill me. He's the diam expert. They're becoming really popular in Burgundy because of oxidation that you can get from cork. So that's cork and diams. Twin tops are literally plastic centers with bits of cork on each end. So they're the sort of fake corks, as you were. So that's that. We'll move on from that one. But if you want to know more, David, do send me a note and I'll send you through some stuff. We've got some bits on the website, but there's plenty of reading you can do. Oh, Catherine's just popped it on the chat. Thank you, Catherine. Right, I'm going to ask this question first in case it takes a while, because this is always my favorite question, Ben. Which was your favorite pairing of the evening?
I actually ended up liking the Chianti with the Ogle Shield.
Okay, nice. I think a few members did as well. Please let us know, members, if that was also your favorite. I would go, do you know what? I'd still go for the one that's my backup wine. I'd go for the Cassara with the Ogle Shield. I think that was actually my favorite in the end.
Also, I agree.
Yeah, and funny that it was funny that I wasn't expecting it to be. I thought I was going to go Chianti and Ogle Shield, but it sounds like the Ogle Shield won for both of us, which
it was definitely one of those two for me.
Lovely. Right, we do have just 2 minutes left, so I'm going to do a quick fire question to you. Edu Perez has asked, Ben, why is cheddar saltier than other cheeses? Why does the process make it saltier?
Well, it shouldn't be saltier. It should be more rounded. Now, within a hard cheese, you add the salt within the curds. With a soft cheese, you add the salt around the curds. So you're always in a hard cheese going to have a more saltier cheese. You also have to think about the mass. And so in a soft cheese, we have more whey, we have more water, so that's why it's softer. And your salt is around the outside. In a hard cheese, all the salt is in the inside, and we have more volume. There is more mass, there is more curd in this. So we naturally have more salt because we salt the curds and not the rind.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Or is that
yeah.
too? Yeah.
So there's salt throughout the cheese as opposed to,
And less moisture.
Yeah. And then earlier we had a very moist Ogle Shield, which was almost sweeter in the middle compared to a much saltier rind.
Yeah.
I'm picking things up, Ben. I'm learning. And then quickly, because I actually have to say, I really love the biscuits that you sent in my pack. Louise has asked any advice on biscuits to match with which types of cheese?
Yeah, so our biscuits, obviously. So, but I go fairly plain. Now, on the next tasting, I've actually put some quite fruity Taste for Cheese. Now, Taste for Cheese by French Cheese Co. are best-selling crackers, and they're just really interesting. And we're going with this extravagance of Easter, so I thought let's go all out and do Taste for Cheese. But generally, I go with plain crackers. And I go with Bath Squares because they have a little bit of sweetness. I go with charcoal because they look really good on the cheese board. Again, fairly plain. I like oat crackers, I think, because they're fairly plain. And I think for me, something like a wheat round, which is just a digestive biscuit, basically. I really love a blue cheese. So,
on a wheat round.
Yeah, on a wheat round. Yeah, that's my one.
I have to say, I stay plain, and I stay really plain. I would only have a digestive or a slightly sweeter biscuit with a blue cheese, and I love that sweet salty combo.
Yeah, completely agree.
Lovely, right. And on that note, because it is 15:15, bang on time, I should absolutely tell members about about your next event, because I'm sadly not going to do it, but the lovely Catherine is going to step into my cheesy shoes. I'm a bit jealous actually, and do a really special Easter tasting that has gone live today, members. The kit, I believe, is live. The wines were chosen by Catherine last night. It went on the website today, and we wanted to make sure that it was ready to go for all you members joining this evening, so that you got first dibs. Because Ben, we sold out of these packs this time round, didn't we?
Well, we had to up it, didn't we?
Yeah, we had to get more, and then I think we even sold out that one. So if you are keen, please join over Easter. I'm hoping to be behind the scenes, but Catherine's done all the hard work on this one, along with Ben, and it's going to be really delicious. So I'll send the link in the follow-up, but if you do want to have a look on the website, it's a special Easter themed cheese celebration on the 30th of March. So thank you, Ben. Again, a cracking evening. Yeah, John, if you haven't seen that one yet, don't worry, it literally went live at about 4:00 this afternoon, so that's why. But thank you all, thanks members so much for coming. I'm always blown away by the quality of the cheeses from you guys, and it's always my favorite event of the month, I think, to just chat along with Ben. So thank you all for coming, and have a good evening. Enjoy the rest of your cheeses. Thank you, Catherine, and I will be sure to be behind the scenes on the next one.
Cheers.
Cheers.